Klingons stopped using one trick against Starfleet after Star Trek VI. Star Trek's Klingons stopped using a particular espionage tactic against the United Federation of Planets after Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Set in 2293, Star Trek VI ushered in a détente between the Klingon Empire and the Federation after the Klingon moon praxis exploded. With the Empire on the brink of economic collapse, Klingon Chancellor Gorkin David Warner sued for peace with the Federation. Peace was ultimately achieved and lasted well into the 24th century Star Trek, the Next Generation era. At the height of the 23rd century Cold War between the Klingon Empire and the Federation, which escalated to violence in the Klingon War of 2256 to 2257 as seen in Star Trek Discovery, the Klingons developed the means to surgically alter themselves to appear human. Given the stark physiological differences between Klingons and humans, this was a brutal and painful procedure, but at least 2 known Klingons were subjected to the torture in order to spy on Starfleet and the Federation. However, this practice stopped after Star Trek VI. Why Klingons stopped infiltrating the Federation disguised as humans after Star Trek VI? After Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country marked a new era of cooperation between the Federation and Klingon Empire. There was no longer any reason for Klingons to surgically alter themselves into humans to become spies. The Klingons became allies of the Federation and openly worked with Starfleet. Lieutenant Worf Michael Dorn then became the first Klingon in Starfleet, rising to become security chief of the USS Enterprise D in Star Trek, The Next Generation. While it's unknown how many Klingons became human spies in the 23rd century, the procedure depicted in Star Trek Discovery is so torturous that it's likely few Klingon warriors subjected themselves to it. Culturally, Klingons pride themselves on facing enemies in glorious battle, and honorable deaths are seen as a gateway to Stu Vokor Klingon heaven. Besides the indignity of being turned into a human, the process is also apparently irreversible, and this is understandably not welcomed by the Klingons. Star Trek's most infamous Klingon-turned-human is Arne Darvin Charlie Brill. In Star Trek, the original series classic episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, Darvin was a Klingon intelligence operative who was installed as the aide to Federation Under-Secretary Nils Barris William Schallert. Thanks to Captain James T. Kirk William Shatner and crew of the USS Enterprise, Darvin's mission to poison the quadrotriticale grain vital for Sherman's planet failed when a Tribble exposed Arne as a Klingon. In the 24th century of Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Arne Darvin returned and attempted to take revenge on Captain Kirk. Darvin used a Bajoran orb of time to travel back to the 23rd century and assassinate Kirk with a bomb he placed inside a Tribble. However, thanks to Captain Benjamin Sisko Avery Brooks and the crew of Deep Space Nine, Darvin failed once again and was apprehended. At the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Starfleet assigned Ash Tyler command of Section 31. Star Trek Discovery not only depicted the gruesome procedure to surgically alter a Klingon into a human, but also introduced its first victim, Vok Shazad Latif. Vok was physically transformed into a human with the likeness of Starfleet Lieutenant Ash Tyler. Ash became part of the USS Discovery's crew, but he later joined his love, Rel Mary Kifo, when she became Chancellor of the Klingon Empire. At the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Starfleet assigned Ash Tyler command of Section 31. For centuries, the Klingon Empire was a force of brute strength and fierce honor. But it wasn't just their martial prowess or bird of prey warships that made them formidable, it was the tricks, the cunning beneath the warrior's mask, that gave them the edge. Among these, one tactic stood out, the cloaked ambush. A Klingon bird of prey would engage its cloaking device, disappear from sensors, and strike without warning. It was their signature move, feared throughout the Alpha Quadrant. And then, after the events of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, they stopped using it. Not because it didn't work, but because it did too well. The Treaty of Khitomer changed more than just diplomatic relations. It reshaped the Klingon soul. The assassination of Chancellor Gorkin, the conspiracy to sabotage peace, and the resulting trial and escape of Captain Kirk revealed just how deeply embedded paranoia and secrecy had become in both the Federation and the Empire. When the rogue General Chang used a modified bird of prey capable of firing while cloaked, It exposed the ultimate flaw in the Klingon tactic, not in strategy, but in spirit. General Chang was everything a Klingon was supposed to be: ferocious, poetic, unrelenting. And yet, his obsession with treachery over honor led him to perfect a weapon that violated the core values of his own people. Firing while cloaked? It was the ultimate ambush. An invisible enemy who could strike and never be seen. But when Chang was destroyed above Khitomer, his ship outwitted by the combined forces of Kirk and Spock, with the aid of a torpedo modulated to detect ionized gas trails, the Klingon High Council saw something alarming. The Federation adapted fast. In the aftermath, the cloaked ambush lost its mystique. Starfleet began outfitting its ships with better sensors, ion tracking, and tachyon detection grids. It was no longer a matter of if they would find the cloaked ship, but when. The trick had been revealed, the magician's secret shown to the audience. Worse, Starfleet captains began expecting cloaked attacks. Tactically, the trick was less effective. Culturally, it became a symbol of dishonor. Honor, battle, is the bedrock of Klingon life. To strike from the shadows was once a practical necessity in the cold void of space. But after Star Trek VI, it was seen as a form of cowardice, especially when wielded like Chang had, not in battle, but in conspiracy. The new Chancellor, Azatbur, Gorkin's daughter, took a hard stance. She saw the potential for peace, yes, but also the danger of letting the Empire rely on underhanded tactics. In a controversial move, she passed the Edict of Garvel, banning the use of cloaked ambushes in formal engagements. Klingon captains could still cloak for reconnaissance or escape, but striking while cloaked, especially with modified weapon systems, was outlawed. Many Klingons resisted. Warriors like Captain Clore of the Vecta argued that war was war, and there were no rules in survival. But Azatbur and her council stood firm. "We are not Romulans," she said during a fiery speech at the Great Hall. "We do not hide in shadows and whisper death. We face our enemies with our blades drawn and our hearts open." Over time, Klingon battle doctrine shifted. The Empire returned to its roots: direct engagement, honorable combat, glorious victories. Cloaking was no longer a trick to tip the scales, but a tool to maneuver. The legend of Chang became a cautionary tale taught at the Imperial War Academy. His image, once revered, became stained with betrayal. Ironically, it was the Federation, so often seen as the Empire's soft counterpart, that kept developing countermeasures to cloaking technology. Klingons stopped using it as a primary tactic, but Starfleet prepared as if every ship might vanish into thin space. The lesson of Chang lingered in the Federation's tactical manuals, even as Klingons moved on. Some modern captains still argue about the utility of cloaking tactics. A few rogue houses even defy the Edict of Garvel and border skirmishes, attempting cloaked raids on outposts or science vessels. But when these captains are caught, they're not praised, they're dishonored. Their names forgotten, their stories untold in the halls of warriors. And so, one of the most feared tricks in Klingon history was left behind. Not because it ceased to work, but because it betrayed what it meant to be Klingon. After Star Trek VI, the Klingons learned a truth the Federation had long suspected. Sometimes, giving up a weapon is the greatest show of strength. Want a more comedic or dramatic version too? I can write one with a twist if you're up for it. Klingon history was left behind. Not because it ceased to work, but because it betrayed what it meant to be Klingon. After Star Trek VI, the Klingons learned a truth the Federation had long suspected. Sometimes, giving up a weapon is the greatest show of strength.